thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Before we launch into all the stuff we're going to talk about, can you just briefly say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. So my name is John Quinn, and I'm a film and television editor living in Burbank, California, if you want to be specific. I went to film school. Since high school, I knew I wanted to be an editor. And so I went to film school. I went to Columbia College Chicago. I moved out here, only had two friends, but I didn't know anybody that could connect into the film industry. But I got my foot in the door after living out here for 3 months. And just every step of the way, every gig has gotten me closer and closer to becoming an editor.
Wow.
And so And so I've been fortunate enough to be the editor on The Chosen since season 1. And so that's been my main gig for like the last 5 years.
So, we've talked a little bit about your background in the past in our conversations about how you originally started as a post PA. Is that correct? And then worked your way up the ladder, kind of?
Yeah. I started off as a post-production assistant, which means that you are bottom of the totem pole in post-production. You are getting coffee and lunches, and you're running errands and stuff like that. And so I did that on 2 big studio films, and I loved it. I loved going to work every day. I loved the crews. And then I was fortunate enough to get my foot in the door as an assistant editor, working for a company that made movies for Sci-Fi Channel. And I was an assistant editor there for a couple of years. And then, one guy left, and I was able to kind of get myself in there. I had people that went to bat for me. One of the reasons somebody went to bat for me and told the producer, "Hey, John can edit," was I was doing gag scenes. I mean, I was doing my assistant editor, I was doing my job as an assistant editor, but whenever I had any downtime, I would take scenes from the movies we were working on, and I would do weird stuff with them. I would create a love story between 2 aliens, but it's not a love story. It's, you know what I mean?
Right.
I would do stuff by, making these 2 characters look longingly at each other and putting romantic music in there. And so the post supervisor, Larry, talked to the producer and said, like, John can edit. John can definitely edit. And so that was my start.
Wow. Amazing. And then that's kind of how you got to be head editor, right? Of different projects and things like that.
I was just the editor. I was
okay.
the editor. That's how I got started.
And so when you started in the business, I know you've done sci-fi stuff, correct? Mm-hmm. And then you also have experience with horror. Can you just tell me a little bit about some of the stuff you've done with that?
Look, I have always loved horror films since I was a teenager. And when I was working with this company that made these Sci-Fi Channel movies, I was so lucky to be there when a couple projects came from Sam Raimi's company. Sam Raimi, who did, the Evil Dead films and Spider-Man and stuff like that.
Yeah, very famous.
And so I got to cut The Grudge 3, and I got to cut Boogeyman 3. And those were basically my first horror films that I got to work on. And it was so much fun. The reason I love working on horror is because it's really the reason in a horror film, a good one, everything that you love about cinema is in there. Obviously, suspense, right? But also, if you think about your favorite horror films, they also have comedy or have some really amazing drama, and good background stories and good characters. It's the reason why I think we love film, is all those elements are all rolled into one in a horror film when it's a good one, Yeah,
absolutely. Speaking specifically, because I know you do identify yourself as a believer in God as well. Where do you, I think there's a lot of people who would have an issue with, like, how are you a believer in God, but also you love horror as a genre? What's kind of your opinion on that? How do you reconcile that?
The thing is with horror films is that it's good triumphing over evil.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually what it is. And I think that if you are saying that there's evil in the world, then you're saying that there's good in the world. If there's a film that has demons or Satan has the devil in it, well, if you're saying the devil exists, then in this world you're saying God exists.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and there's something cathartic about it. It's so wonderful. It's like a roller coaster. It's like, why ask nobody questions Christians that like to go on roller coasters. What's happening when you're on a roller coaster? When you're on a roller coaster, I mean, it's like you should not be going upside down or going so fast, or, where it looks like you think you're going to hit the ground. You think you're going to die, but you don't. And so it's like doing this crazy thing on a roller coaster, but you're safe. You're safe. That's what happens when you watch a horror film.
Yeah.
You're safe because none of it's real, but there's something that's really amazing that can happen in a really good horror film that's cathartic. You can encounter your fears and overcome them, sort of.
I really appreciate that you said that, and I actually really relate to that, because for me personally, so something that I love stories about like demon hunters. Like I love demon hunter shows and stuff like that. And one time someone asked me, like, why, I mean, you call yourself a Christian, why do you watch this, right? That's like the classic question. And then I was like, well, the thing is that the best way to show the best good possible in the world is to contrast it with the worst evil possible, right? And it's like you're rooting for these characters who are hunting down these evil beings. And when they overcome it, because that situation was so evil or so dark, it's cathartic, like you said. And it's like so inspiring, and it makes you feel like there's hope in the world. And like, that's why I love it. So I really appreciate that you said that.
Here's another thing also that I've thought about, which is, people can say, how can you work on this type of stuff and call yourself a Christian? It's what has put food on the table and kept a roof over my head with my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have known, some Christian editors who thought, what I do is awful, but what they do is, so much better because it's a reality show. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Fine.
No, it's fair.
I think that, but yeah.
Fair point. But obviously now you're in a different genre because you're working on The Chosen. And I do really want to talk about how you got involved in that, because I think that story is so crazy. How you met Dallas Jenkins and all of that.
Okay. So this is how I met Dallas Jenkins. This is crazy. So I got the gig for a Christmas movie, but the footage wasn't ready, but I was in the neighborhood anyway. And I got the receptionist who was working here at this post-production facility called Kappa Studios. I got her the job here. I was able to connect her and get her the gig. So I was like, I'm in the area anyway. I'm going to stop by and say hello to her. I'm here at Kappa Studios in the reception area, not even for like a minute, when all of a sudden my cell phone rings and I see it's the owner of Kappa Studios, a guy named Paul Long. I answer the phone. I said, hello, Paul. And he goes, hey, Johnny, hey. And he's about to start to say more stuff. And I said, Paul, I'm here. And he's like, what do you mean you're here? And I'm like, I'm here in the reception area. And he's like, get in here. Paul was calling me to ask me to come in right then and there, if I was available. Come into Kappa Studios because there's this guy named Dallas Jenkins who's trying to find an editor to edit this TV show that he's going to be doing. And so I watch his short film. I look him up on Facebook. I see we have mutual friends. And so I'm just waiting for him to come up the stairs at some point. And finally he does. Dallas walks up the stairs. I recognize him. I say, excuse me, are you Dallas Jenkins? He says, why, yes, I am. I said, hi, I'm John Quinn. Paul wanted us to meet. And he goes, John Quinn. Picks up his cell phone. He starts scrolling through it. And he tells me, your agent submitted you for my TV show 2 hours ago.
Wow.
My agent didn't even tell me they were submitting me for, some faith-based Christian Jesus show. And I was like, but here's the thing. He looks at the top of the resume and he said, because he opens the email, he looks at the top and he says, Tales from the Hood Part 2, huh? And I said, yeah, what are you going to do? And so we wind up talking for 2 hours, and we just talk shop, and we just, talk like a couple of film nerds. We talked about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We talked about, here's something that I don't think many people know. I mean, like one of the things we talked about was The Walking Dead.
Wow.
And one thing that's really awesome about The Walking Dead is, have you ever noticed when you watch The Walking Dead, they will have characters. They'll start an episode with a character that you've never met before, and you have no idea how they play into the rest of the show. And you're with this character on their journey, and then finally it's revealed. The Chosen has done that a few times
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
where it starts off with a character, and you don't know. You're kind of like, why are we with this person? Well, actually, I don't think you ever think, why are we with this person? Because I think the writers do a great job with, you're brought into their story. You care for whatever reason. You care about these people, but you're also like, how is this going to play? And I think it's really awesome for, fans. I think it's awesome for people that know the Bible so well, how long it takes for them to click and know, that's Jairus.
That's like one of my favorite parts about it, to be honest. Like, as a viewer, is like sitting there and watching it and being like, someone comes on screen that you've never met before, and you're like, huh. And then all of a sudden at some point it makes a connection. Like, I feel like that kind of happens a little bit for a lot of people with Judas, right? Because when you first meet him, he's just like standing there with this other guy in the field until they say his name. Yeah. And you're like, ah.
Well, okay, now dig this. Okay. So with the episode with Judas, so we're talking about season 2, episode 8, the very first scene, and we're introduced to these two characters. Now, in my first cut, the way I had edited it, I was not trying to give it away that was Judas, but I was cutting it in a way, the audience member I was thinking of was when somebody watches it for the second time.
Yeah.
I was trying to cut it in a way so that you wouldn't think that he's definitely Judas, but I was trying to cut it on certain lines, cutting to him so that, like I said, when you watch it, because I know so many people watch it way more than one time. And so I sent it to my director. I sent it off to Dallas, and he came back with a general note, and he said, I want the audience to think the other guy is Judas. So recut it in that way. And so when you watch it, you'll notice that I think there might be only one close-up of Judas in that scene. I have tons of close-ups and stuff that focuses on him. But I think we only might use just one shot where it's a close-up. The other close-ups are singles. I'm mainly on the other guy.
It's true.
So that it's a total misdirect. If anybody's going to think one of them is Judas, they're going to think it's the other guy.
I actually I've never consciously thought about that before, but now that you say that, I totally see it. And that is such a powerful thing, because like there's few things better when you're a creator making something than if you can catch your audience by surprise in a really good way, or make them rethink a perception that they once held, and be like, well, maybe I wasn't looking at that the right way. Like, so that's so cool and amazing.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I love that introduction of him. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's great. So I do want to get into, cause we're going to take some time here and break down some specific scenes and talk about them.
Okay.
Like we just did with that one. But before we get into that, I did want to ask, as far as you're comfortable sharing, I know that The Chosen has had an impact on your personal faith journey, which I know is still, you've mentioned to me, a very new thing. But I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about what you mean by that.
Before The Chosen, I had never read the Bible. I was raised Christian, I was confirmed and all that, raised Protestant and everything. And I went to church, but what's wild is that when I got hired to work on The Chosen, I was not going to church, intentionally not going to church. I had just lost a really good friend and his son that year. And I just had a lot of stuff going on in my head. I just was like, I can't go. I'm not going. And my family would go and they would just leave and I'd stay at home on a Sunday. And so it's just wild that when I got the call that said, you're hired, we want you to be the editor of this show called The Chosen. I was like, really? I'm not going to church and I'm going to be, now I have to spend 50 hours a week with Jesus. Okay. And honestly, it's crazy, but I just feel like I relate to Matthew on so many levels, and one of them is just him learning, him learning about Torah. And I do feel a lot like Matthew, that as he's learning, I'm learning. I'm at the same level. So I'm reading the Bible for the first time in my life. I know I should start with the Old Testament, but I'm sorry, I'm loving the New Testament. That's where I started.
I love it too. I
Um,
love it too.
yeah, but and so there's been sad things, tragic things that have happened to me or people I love in the last few years since I've been working on The Chosen. But man, my headspace is in such a better place because I'm definitely grasping, you know, this
Yeah.
this world, this life through faith, through being a Christian. I'm like my father passed away recently, 2 months ago, and I was able to pray over him before he passed and speak and give a eulogy like I never would have been able to 5 years ago. Like,
Right.
and it's because of The Chosen. There's lines of dialogue that stick out in my head that are just burned in my brain, and it gives me comfort.
Me too.
And yeah, and so I get it's crazy because I get it. I hear that from other people too. So much of the show of so many people who have gone through such tragedy.
Yeah. It becomes really special when some of those people that are impacted are the people on the team, are the people working on it. And that's really a
Yeah,
testament to the stories and the characters and just how it's being put together and how it's being told, I think.
yeah. I think you know, I don't know what the writer's intention is. Like, I'd be curious. I'd be curious.
Yeah.
If their main goal is to impact or entertain, because I do feel
Mm.
like a problem with some faith-based product, some films, is that they want to impact. They
Yeah.
they they focus more on them wanting to impact people versus wanting to tell a good story. And I just feel like, look, if you tell a good story, you're going to impact people,
Hmm.
and that's on every single level and every single genre, you know. And so that's definitely because of The Chosen. I think because of The Chosen. I think because the storytelling is so good. I think that's why it's having an impact versus, you know,
I definitely think that a huge part of The Chosen's success is due to, like you said, to the storytelling. And like what pulled me in, I'm a character person. I love falling in love with characters. And when I started watching The Chosen, I was like a little skeptical because we've seen tons of other faith-based content that just doesn't hit the mark, like it just misses. So I started watching The Chosen. I was like, man, like I'm falling in love with these characters just as people. And it's such a good point that you brought up because this applies to me with the Bible too. I was talking to someone very close to me in my life recently about, I was like, I want to spend more time in God's word, but I'm struggling a lot with um, staying engaged, right, with the Bible. Sometimes the language is thick and hard to get through and that kind of thing. And they were like, here's the thing, the Bible is an incredible story. So don't approach it as if you're trying to study it like a student or like put so much pressure on it. Approach it as if you are just reading a story. And what do you do when you're reading a book series you love? You watching a movie series you love. You fall in love with the characters. You know their names. You know their backstory. And then you look into the details behind it and you know the plot. Read the Bible that way as one big story. Fall in love with the characters. Fall in love with the plot. Track those plot lines through, see where they go, see where people end up. And looking at it that way has made the Bible so much more real and so much more personal to me and so much more impactful. And I think The Chosen does the same thing.
I think that it's because I don't I never whenever I was in church and they would read scripture, I can't imagine any of these people are. I can't imagine when they would, I can imagine Matthew after The Chosen. Now you can. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's not so foreign. It's so relatable. The things that the way, at least for us to imagine, maybe this is what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. this is making me really excited because what we're going to do now is we're going to break down some scenes
Oh,
because
okay.
you
All
are
right.
such a fantastic editor and I love your work. And there's so many scenes. We're just going to do like 3 or 4 here. There's so many
Okay.
scenes I want to talk to you about. But the first one I want to talk to you about and kind of just really break down is the obviously Mary's possession
Mm-hmm.
in the first episode of the first season. Um, and I know that you've said that episode was your first time working with Dallas, which I can only imagine is an interesting experience. So why don't we just start by let's talk about how that episode came to be a little bit and the editing process behind that.
Okay. So Dallas did not, and still doesn't. He doesn't really tell me this should be cut this way. I'm they for folks that don't know, a scene is shot, you know, dozens of way, shot over and over and over again from many different angles, and they run the entire scene. It's not like they get a close up and we like, oh, let's just get these three lines. Like, no, if it's like a 3-page scene, they're going to run the entire scene for, on the close up. So the editor has to figure out, what's going to be the first shot and then the second and then the third. And also, when do you cut away? When are you on somebody who's talking? And then when are you showing the person that's listening? There's so many things that we're having to juggle. We have to think about the very moment that we're focused on when we're choosing, which shot to cut to, which angle, which performance. But then we have to think of, the next scene. And then we got to think of the entire episode. Then we got to think of the whole entire season. Then we got to think of the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
I was not given a roadmap. Okay. So I approached the show like I would any show. This is just the way I feel. This is and then I would use temp score. Temp score stands for temporary score, temporary music. The last thing done on a film is the music, the actual score. But most times, most directors and producers, they need music in there just so they can kind of watch it and feel it and see what it's going to probably feel like once the final version is done. So that's what I was doing. I was putting in temp score. I was putting in music, as I'm cutting along and cutting in sound effects. Okay, so we get to Mary's possession, right? The exorcism scene,
Right.
and Dallas, Dallas had said he thinks it's a great thing that I have a horror film background. He said in another podcast interview that he wanted a horror editor or horror film fan because those people tend to be big film nerds, and he wanted a film nerd as his editor, which I am. I have a Letterboxd account, so that you can't get any more film nerdy than that.
Indeed.
Yeah, I cut it the way I cut it like it was a horror film. I thought, oh, okay, he wants me to do my thing with this horror thing. So if you were to see the first cut of the Mary Mag possession scene, I'm when they open the door,
Mm-hmm.
I have low end rumble going, like the kind that you would hear like in Paranormal Activity when a ghost is or some sort of ghost activity is going to happen. So I had this low end uncomfortable rumble, something that you would maybe hear in a lot David Lynch film, and then the music comes in, and I'm using score from the temp music I'm using is from The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It has these high pitched strings happening, and then Mary starts contorting. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I put in sounds of bone breaking,
Yeah.
like as she's contorting. It was so nasty. It was so amazing. um, and then she speaks, and so I had done a horror film before that within the last year or two, where I figured out how to do the Evil Dead voice effect. If you've seen Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, there's this thing that they do where it sounds like there's 5 or 7 voices coming out of them. It's like different octaves, and it's really creepy. And so I carried that effect over and brought it into Avid, the editing software I use, and I put it on her. And it was, we're not afraid of you. You
Yeah.
have no power here, teacher. It was so creepy. Oh, and it was really long. I mean, it was much longer than it is now. So sent that cut off to Dallas and got it back, and he said, "Yeah, we got to pull it back, man. It doesn't. No, this isn't. No." and so now you have what you have now.
Yeah, right. I
A
think,
lot more grounded.
but it is still so, it's so punchy. Like it, and I love, this isn't necessarily, it's some editing, but also some directing, just like in general. I love the contrast in that episode between, like, obviously Nicodemus comes to see her first.
Yeah.
By the way, I should say, for anyone listening, if you don't want spoilers, this
Oh
is
yeah,
not
we
a
probably
good part to listen to.
Can you put something at the beginning?
Yeah,
Spoilers.
we'll throw something up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously Nicodemus comes and sees her first, and he's unsuccessful in whatever he's trying to do. And then obviously near the end, Jesus is the one that comes and is able to actually perform the exorcism. And the contrast between the two and like how that whole situation goes is so cool, I think.
So here's something that I don't think has been mentioned before. I think I'm okay to talk about this. This is the moment where I was like, because the Chosen season 1, it was the first 4 episodes, and then there was a break, and then they later came back and we did the next 4. Okay, so we're doing the first 4 episodes. And so I was working with Dallas, and the 2 writers were in here as well. And this is when I knew, I was like, they're going to bring me back. It was this moment. So I believe it's starting with Mary going to starting with Nicodemus, actually.
Yeah.
The way it was originally scripted and the way it was originally cut, the order of scenes is totally rearranged.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, it was at one point when like Simon and Andrew go talk to Matthew, the tax collector, and Andrew's like, "What just happened?" And Simon says, "Oh, just don't talk, just keep walking." There was like another scene, and then after that scene, then we went to them in the bar, and Simon is explaining everything, and I'm like, no. It should, like, let's put all the Simon and Andrew scenes all together, because originally there was just a little too much ping ponging.
Right.
This is the big thing. That originally Mary goes to the cliff, contemplates suicide, sees the dove, and walks away from the cliff. Then we went to Nicodemus, and Nicodemus, at the end of that scene, says, "Souls such as hers are beyond human aid."
Yeah.
We just saw that maybe there is hope that that maybe she is beyond human aid, because we just saw her on the cliffs.
Right.
We saw her on the cliff, she walks away, and now Nicodemus is going to say, "Oh, there's no hope for her." No, the order should be, what if? And I said this to the writers. I said, "Guys, what if Nicodemus says souls such as hers are beyond human aid?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we see her at the cliffs. Now we think that this woman might actually commit suicide.
Yeah.
And it just makes so much sense, and it feels so right.
Yeah.
And there were all, and so once again, and so that triggered a snowball effect with shifting other scenes around and everything. And it was awesome. I mean, like, I suggested this to them, and Dallas said, "Do it, try it." And so, within, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, I was like, "Okay, check it out." We watched like the final 20 minutes or so, and they loved it. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, that's so...
They're going to bring me back.
Yeah, as they should.
I proved myself.
As they should. I mean, that is such a cool story that, yeah, most people definitely don't know. And I think that's a big part of, like, editing that a lot of people might not know, too, is that to a certain extent, depending on what's happening, you are crafting the story in a way. Because just because you are handed that script with a specific order, you still as a creative watched it and were like, but wait, I think I know a way to make it better. And then you're able to do that, And I think that that's so amazing. Talking about Nicodemus, I really want to also break down the scene that is the conversation between him and Jesus, which is in season 1, episode 7, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which, first of all, it's so long. It's so much talking.
I remember like thinking, wow, this is just 2 people talking for a very long time.
Right. But and yet somehow it works. Like it really works. the other specific thing that I noted when I went back and watched that scene again, because the reason it was in my head is because I remembered the first time. I didn't remember specifically why, but I just remembered being so impacted and like sobbing during that scene. And I think part of it is because the buildup had been so good throughout the season up to that point. Like, you knew this was coming, and then when it finally came, it was incredible. But the shots are really interesting, and I'd love to hear like anything you remember about editing them together, because half of the shots are like static, like locked off shots, and then you also have this like rotating
this rotating roundabout. I don't think that's the actual term. I call it the roundabout shot.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's like, you don't want it to be jarring. Dallas has a certain style with editing where he just does not want anybody to notice the cuts. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that we tend to usually cut in the middle of a word or a phrase. It's never like somebody's done talking and now we're going to cut the other person. Right. If we ever do that, it's a very much intentional thing. The thing that I recall from cutting that was that we tried to stay in the roundabouts as long as we could, so long as either we saw the person talking or or if it was a good moment to see the person listening. So every time we're on one of those roundabout shots, that was, we tried to use them as much as possible. I do believe that originally I did an edit without them, and so that I could make it work without those. And then me and Dallas reviewed the roundabouts and then figured out what parts can we kind of put in and where can we, I think that it is a really tough thing to try and go from, a rotating shot to then a static shot.
Yeah.
But we did our best to make for it to be motivated. There always and when the shows in there is always a reason to cut. The cut always needs to be motivated.
Right. And I think also, like, I will just jump in and say here, as a viewer of that scene, for me personally, this is just my own experience, that was so effective, I think, those like rotating shots, because it made you, sometimes when you're watching film or TV, you feel like you are like experiencing what the person on screen is experiencing, right? Like, very immersive. But with that scene specifically, I think because of those rotating shots, for me, it felt so much like I was a third person there observing, which is so powerful, because that's like such a big important conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus, and it made me feel like I was there, but I wasn't either one of them. I was there as myself. Like, I was walking around them, I was observing, and it like made it hit so much harder for me, I think.
Oh, that's so cool. That's fantastic. If you look at the scene, you'll see that it's very intentional. That, it's kind of a traditional kind of thing where, we didn't go to close-ups unless it was something impactful, but many times we don't want it to be jarring. We don't tend, I think we're not necessarily going to the close-up of Nicodemus for this particular line. It's like, normally we'll kind of tee up the close-up of Nicodemus by going to the close-up of Jesus first, and then we'll go to Nicodemus. I was watching it earlier today too, and I was like, oh, I see I'm seeing the things that we were doing. We were discovering the language of the show, the like editorial language, if you will.
Yeah, it was so early on. It was so early on in the process. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've just gotten the gist of the way Dallas likes to cut, better and better. And in fact, as each season has gone along, me and my co-editor Adam have gotten less and less notes from him, because we're definitely becoming more and more in sync with his vision. But yes, it was really interesting to try and cut this super long dialogue scene and have it not be boring. And when you have performances by those two actors, it's impossible it's possible for it to be boring, because they're so good. And really the most difficult thing about cutting that shot, really, that scene, was which angle do I want to be on? That was really because everything was gold.
Yeah.
The actor who plays Nicodemus, when it really hit him hard, like what was happening. I know at one point in the scene he gets emotional,
Yes.
and the first take, it was he was it hit him like for real. Something happened, and it was amazing to see. I mean, we couldn't use it because it was too much, but
Wow.
yeah, I don't know the actor's background. I don't know, what
Right.
their religion is or anything, but it is amazing that the way it's hitting different people, the
Absolutely.
actor.
Yeah, those two are just both so incredible. Their work is so
You
incredible.
want to know? You want to know how great Jonathan Rumi is? He's so in character. I believe it's in the bloopers. I hope it is. So in episode 3 of season 1, it's Jesus, talking to the children, and he's teaching the children. And in this outtake, this ginormous insect lands on his arm, and I would, and any normal human being would just swat it at me, like, and would freak out. And what does Jonathan Rumi do? He is so in character. Jonathan, the thing lands on him. Jonathan notices it, and Jonathan goes, "Oh, hello," and he takes his finger, lets the insect get onto his finger, and then and he continues talking. He doesn't. They don't see how cut or anything. He just keeps on going. Such a little thing. I wonder if
Wow.
Jonathan even remembers that. I actually need to ask him
Wow.
next time he comes through. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty insane.
yeah, yeah.
Moving on to the final scene, we're going to break down. This is one I know you're very passionate about. One that I sobbed over. I mean, let's be honest, I cry at least once per episode, but it's The Chosen. Um, but that is the scene at the end of season 3, episode 8, the walking on water scene with
Yeah.
Jesus and the disciples in the boat in the storm. And I almost don't even know where to start with this. There's so many interesting things about this, editing wise. I guess the most obvious being that it's intercut with Eden in the going into the pool, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's going between Simon once Jesus shows up, and we can talk about the stuff before this happens. Once Jesus shows up and Simon's like, "Command me to come out on the water with you," and he steps out and he starts walking, it's then all of a sudden like intercut very closely with what Eden's going through. And I just think that's so interesting. Was that originally the way it was in the script, and
Okay.
how did that come about?
Yeah. Okay. So the way it was written in the script is different. There was intercutting. There was intercutting in the script, but where it occurs now was in different spots.
Mm.
It wasn't the timing of when they were saying the dialogue. It just wasn't shot the same way as it was scripted, and so it was just not gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
What I had done was I had intercut it just the way it was scripted. And then my assistant editor, my assistant editor on season 3, Shy, um, she was one assistant editor working for 2 editors. It was awful, so much work, and she never got a chance to do any editing. But here we are, finally at the end, and I say to her, "Hey, take this and do intercutting like the way where you think it should go." And basically, what you're seeing now is where she chose to intercut it, where it made
Wow.
sense. She's the one that chose, and she was right. I mean, look, maybe I would have gotten to that, hopefully, I'm sure it would have, but she was the one that saw go from the feet to the feet. It wasn't, and like I said, some of that was scripted, but it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't, it was in different spots, and she was the one that took it.
Sure.
And then that was what she had done, was basically what I showed Dallas both versions, and he's like, let's work off of that version. Let's work off of the intercutting that Shy had done.
Yeah.
And anytime like one of my assistants does something, I always give them credit.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
always, and if my director dislikes something and my assistant editor had cut it, I own it like it's mine. I'm not gonna like throw my assistant editor under the bus and be like, oh, well, they did that. It's let me fix it. No, that's not cool.
That's truly a testament to who you are as a
uh,
person. I think that's amazing.
I couldn't live with myself, but yeah, but she was the one, and she was like, the spots all made sense.
Yeah.
When we did the intercutting.
The thing that gets to me with that scene, there's so many things, but with what we're specifically talking about right now, is at the end, once Simon has already, again, spoilers, major spoilers here, he's walked on water and then he starts doubting, right? He's looking around at the waves and so he starts sinking. And Jesus catches him, brings him up, which we'll talk more about, I'm sure, in detail. Brings him up, and Simon's hanging on, and he's saying, "Don't let me go. Don't let me go," over and over again. And then it cuts to Eden, and she's like praying to God, and she's saying, "Don't let him go." And it's happening at the same time. And it's
that intercutting scripted. Yeah.
But it's so powerful. Like, it's so powerful. I do want to know, like, I want to give you some freedom to just talk about this however you want, because I've heard you say that this is one of the things in your career that you're proudest of, editing. Is that true?
Yeah.
This scene?
Oh, absolutely.
So it is. Tell me about why you have such passion for this scene specifically.
Oh, man. Like, here's the thing. That footage came in. I believe they shot that over the course of 2 days in a tank in Louisiana. And the footage came in, and I mean, look, I couldn't believe that I was going to get the cut the walking on water scene.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe we were doing it. Dallas said we will never do that. I couldn't believe we were doing it. And the way they figured out how to weave it into the story so that it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just like, oh, here's a miracle. Anyways, I get the footage, and I'm blown away. I am in so much awe. I've never spent so much time reviewing dailies and putting something together. Basically, what I did was for the most part, I listened to music by Ennio Morricone, and I reviewed all of the footage. And there was a lot of footage. They've ran that scene over and over again from multiple angles, focusing on each disciple. It's not like they grabbed the camera and they filmed the actor who plays Matthew, and they said, "Okay, Matthew, say your lines. Okay, react to this and react to that." No, I mean, they off camera, they ran the entire thing. And so I have there's a whole, there's like a 5 or 8 minute take of the actor who plays Matthew. And even though I only cut to him 6 or 7 or 8 times, I could have been on him the entire time.
Right.
And so I went beat by beat in the script, and I basically took those beats and put it into a timeline and made markers of what each beat was. And as I reviewed the footage, I took that footage and put into the timeline of what fits for each beat. But I also, anything that was just amazing or gold, I would throw it into like a selects reel. It was all such amazing footage. It looked amazing without the effects. I know Dallas had said he didn't know if it was going to work, like when he saw it without the effects and everything. But what's funny is that because I have this background, starting off with doing visual effects heavy films for like Sci-Fi Channel, I can think fourth dimensionally. I can see something and know, like, oh, I know exactly what the effects guys are going to do. They're going to do this and that. Here's the thing. I went to the film where they were the actors were in a boat, and they were on a boat, and there was green screen, and they were not in water. They were just almost like, it might as well have been a warehouse, and they were on cement, and the boat wasn't rocking back and forth. You know what I mean? It just did not look good. But for them to do what they did, the Chosen could have done that too, by the way. They could have put a boat, put them on a green screen, and done CGI water and everything. The thing is, so much of that is practical.
Yeah.
The boat was really going back and forth. The boat was really in a tank with the waves. There was really a rain machine coming down. It's amazing that we were able to cut it, because the wind and the rain, you can't hear most of what was being said.
I was thinking about that. I was like, what? Was that like tons of ADR? Like, what was that?
So they were able to salvage, I think, some of it where they could, but a lot of it had to be done via ADR, and they killed it.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds incredible.
Yeah. I just knew this was going to impact people like you wouldn't believe. So I spent a whole week reviewing all the footage and cutting it And I mean, if you were to see the first timeline, it was probably 20 minutes. I
Wow.
had anything that was good, anything between good and gold was in this super long 20-minute timeline of everything. If you were to see it, you would see Jesus, saying his lines from every angle and every take that I thought was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And after I had this super long thing where, I then whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down. And then then I dropped in sound effects, and then I played it for my assistant editors, and they were blown. The assistant editors and my co-editor, and they were blown away. You know what? Music. Wait a second. Okay, no, never mind. Let me say that another thing about this scene was okay. So I just knew this was going to be impact people, and it was going to blow them away. They were not going to have any idea this was coming.
Yeah.
I cannot believe the way we were able to keep that under wraps. So here I am. I've watched the film. Oh, here's one thing that's crazy. They're filming season 3. We needed to lock the walking on water scene. We needed to lock it early enough so that the VFX people had time to work on it.
Right.
So it's June. They took a hiatus for like a few weeks, and during those few weeks, Dallas came out to LA, and him and I worked together on it so that we could lock picture on that.
Wow.
Because and what's funny is that I think there was like still 2 months, maybe 3 months left in the schedule of filming for the show, and we locked that early enough. So here I am working with Dallas in the room together, and I've seen the walking on water scene like probably 20 times already, 25 times. And so Dallas is behind me on the couch, and he's saying, and I'm looking forward at the screen, and he goes, okay, so when Simon does this, it does this with his hand or with his arm, and I'm not turning around and because I've gotten emotional. Dallas is like, turn around and look at me. And I said, I can't. And he's like, what do you mean you can't? And I said, I'm getting emotional, man. I can't turn around and look at you right now. And the scene that, and what got to me was when Simon yells at Jesus, your own, what, oh gosh, what is it that he says?
I think I know because I just watched it. He says something, he's like, you're spending time with Gentiles and breaking up fights in Decapolis and your own people.
When your own people,
when
your own person is here. I've been right here in front of you, believing in you. And my TV broadcasting teacher from high school, I had within the last like 6 months or so, I'd gotten in touch with him, and I found out that he has ALS. I had no idea he was a Christian. I found his wife, and then she said that her husband had been trying to find me because they were watching The Chosen, and they saw edited by John Quinn, and they didn't know if it was me or not. Jim Francois, my TV teacher, he had been in a wheelchair and on a breathing device, and just for like 5 years. And so he had really been on my mind a lot, how just this awful thing has happened to him, and he still believes, and still, anyways, he was on my mind a lot. And for some reason, like I said, I've watched it 20, 25 times. For some reason, it hit me. And it hits me when I'm sitting in with my director, who's this very manly man guy, and I'm like crying in front of him. And then I start laughing because I think it's, hilarious that, that's happening. I'm crying in front of my director. Oh my gosh. So anyways, I'm, and then I see and I think it's good. And then I see the effects. Oh my gosh, in the footage that I saw, you could clearly see Jesus. He was on a blue floaty
platform,
this thing that's just
I remember seeing
the
behind the scenes of that, actually.
Yeah.
And he had to balance on that thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so but it's interesting because they wanted it to be realistic of what it would be like walking on water during a storm.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that it wasn't perfect,
Oh, me
Um,
too. That's one of my favorite things about it is that like he's talking and he's saying these super profound things, but he's also clearly in a storm and he's like leaning with the tide and with the waves to balance, and it like makes it so much more realistic, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's wild. And so I thought we were going to see him a lot more, you know what I
Mm.
mean? But no, it's oh, man, when you see that, I didn't know the silhouette thing was going to happen. When you see that
Oh my
silhouette with the light,
word.
right?
Oh my word. That is like that's got to be one of my favorite things in the whole series so far is that like flash of silhouette. And who is it that first sees it? Is it John? I think it's John.
Oh, it is John.
I think it's
He's
John.
the one that he thinks he sees something. He's like, what
Yeah.
is that?
And everyone's like, we don't
They
see anything. And
yeah,
then I think it might be Andrew that sees it next. And
yeah.
he's like, a
And it says
ghost. And
a
everyone
ghost. It's a
stands up.
ghost. And then Matthew's like, ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Matthew's yeah.
It's all just so good. When you were editing this scene and working on it, what was the overall theme that you were going for? What was the motivation that was like in your head the entire time as you're doing this? What was it that was fueling the work that you were doing?
Wow. What was feeling it was the fact that nobody knew that this was going to come, that this was going to happen. And I think what was fueling it was that this is going to be for a long time. This is going to be the definitive version of Jesus walking on water.
Yeah.
It was a bit. It was a little stressful. I mean, you know what I mean. It was. If I did not take it lightly, I felt like this was a huge undertaking and a huge responsibility to create this sequence and have it be perfect. And I don't think I'll ever cut something as important and as just epic
Yeah.
as that. And I think one of the reasons why it laid heavily on me is that if you were to watch the walk in a water scene, I don't it it if you were to watch the walk in a water scene just on its own, you might be like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But if you've watched The Chosen all 3 seasons, if you watch the final episode from the beginning, or that the final episode of season 3 from the beginning too, it it hits you like you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
believe,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, yeah, I think that's what fueled it was that I knew how what a big deal it was. I just didn't take it lightly, and I was just really excited. I loved every moment that I was working on that thing. I wish I could just. I wish I could have continued. I wish I could have continued. I wish I could have continued to work on it because the footage was so much gold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So much gold.
I can only imagine how much pressure that must have felt like. And
And
you definitely delivered. Like it's
it
incredible.
and I know we got to wrap things up, but I got to say about that really quickly. So I got a 12-year-old daughter. We went to go see that episode in theaters, the walk in a water scene. The final episode. We saw it in the movie theater. It played in theaters, and my daughter had no idea that was coming. She and everybody else thought the finale was the Freedom of the 5,000. As soon as my kid figures it out that the walking on water is going to happen, she's sitting next to me. She grabs my hand and she holds my hand and she doesn't let go from then until the end of the walking on water scene. She was just like, she couldn't believe it. She was
Wow.
so loving it. And so I don't know. So it was like the perfect ending to the season 3 finale.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing those stories. I think
Sure.
people are really going to, it's a scene people love. It's a scene I love. And I think people are going to really enjoy hearing the behind the scenes of it.
Cool.
You have so much experience and have done so many amazing things. What is some advice that you would offer to people in my position who we're just entering that phase of life? What would you say?
Oh, I would say, I mean, I just think you guys are in such an amazing position. If we're talking about Christian filmmakers,
Mm-hmm.
it's an exciting time. The bar has been raised by so many talented people like the Irwin brothers, and the guys who made Courageous and Dallas Jenkins. It's such an amazing time. You guys have so many resources. Look, my advice is look at who's doing what you want to do and find out how they got to be where they're at, and then go make it your own. Um, I would say you got to forge relationships. You need to create friendships and relationships. That's what this town is built on. If I've spoken at colleges, and I've done a keynote that shows how I wound up on The Chosen. And there is at least 14 events in my life, friendships and other gigs and other friendships and more friendships, that led to me being here at Kappa Studios. You know, look, one of the reasons I was in the building was because I helped somebody else get a job there, and here at
Right.
Kappa. I think always be looking out for your friends and colleagues, and to help them. Um, I'm not saying help people because it's going to help you, but it it tends to come back, especially if the reason you're helping people is to not be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought, the Editors Guild has mixers, has meetups and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, why am I going to go to a mixer and meet other editors? These are my competition. These people. Why am I going to become friends with other editors? These are my competition. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out that the way a lot of editors get work is from other editors. Actually, it's not. Editors don't get work just from producers or directors. Many times it's an editor maybe needs another editor to come on board, or an editor needs or an editor has to turn down a show.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate, especially as someone who's about to graduate college and enter the workforce, it can feel really scary. So hearing advice and experiences from someone like you who's had that experience is so valuable. And thank you so much also just for coming and talking with me today about The Chosen and about your journey as an editor and how you got where you are. And it's all just been so wonderful to talk about with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really, it was an honor to be asked to be on and talk about this. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.